Welcome to another episode of the Waffle Shop podcast. Today I'm joined, but what I can already tell is going to be one of my new favorite people. Is podcaster, entrepreneur, property developer, all-round legend, Ellie McKay. Welcome to the Waffle Shop.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Taylor. You know what? I think we'll just stick with all-round legend. That
There we
is
go.
enough said.
What else do we need to say? That's literally, I think that's what you should just change your LinkedIn to be. You just forget all the other credentials, just all-round legend.
Well, I did have it, but the team keep changing it back.
Oh God, so restrictive. Why? No, it's your LinkedIn. You do what you want with it.
Exactly. I'm with you. All-round legend. Yeah, chuck in mother of three to that, three crazy children, two puppies that you will probably hear. You know what? I'm going to be honest, right? This is a confession. They're not actually puppies. They're fully grown dogs, but because they're small, I just like to say that because they're feral.
Yeah.
Not very well trained.
Do you know what? This is one of my new favorite words, feral, because I don't know what it is. It's coming into summer. The sun's trying to come out. It's getting a little bit warm. And there's certain songs at the minute that are just making me want to go feral.
Well, you know what? When you've got kids, the word feral tends to get used a
Yeah.
lot. Maybe that's just my house.
No, I think this is my mum would call me the same thing, to be fair. And I'm 33. How are you doing? How's things?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Everything's a roller coaster. I'm always saying the bigger you get, the bigger your challenges get. But that's why I love to keep it real as well, because social media just portrays a bit of a
Oh,
highlight reel, and life can be challenging, and it's really interesting. By the way, I'm not very good at small talk. I always go really
straight in there with the deep stuff.
my definition of success has changed so much over the last 5 years. And it's because of that simple question that you just asked. Because, firstly, not enough people ask,
Yeah.
other people how they are. And the vast majority of time, they're not really interested in kind of listening to the answer. And whilst I'm a great advocate for personal accountability, no one's coming to save you. Ultimately, we do need to do it for ourselves. I think that we also are in a time where there's a lot of division, there's a lot of hatred, and actually we need a lot more. This sounds really woo-woo, but we do need a lot more love and compassion. But
Yeah.
the reason I'm mentioning all of this when you've just asked a really simple question is because my definition of success now is very much based around not necessarily happiness, but peace of mind.
Yeah.
It's about being able to, it's not going to get easier. One of my favorite quotes is from a guy called Jim Rohn, and he said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. So whether it's
Wow.
business, whether it's personal, I'm a great believer that like your business can only actually grow at the same extent that you do, which is why I, over the last few years, have completely flipped my whole personality, really. And I'm a lot more interested, and by no means a guru in this space, but I'm interested in things like not just mental health, but physical health, spiritual health,
It's all linked.
nutrition. It's all linked to that simple question: how are you feeling? Because usually, not always, but usually when the answer to that is not so great, there is normally something that perhaps I've let slide, which happens quite a lot because I'm a bit of a do as I say, not as I do type at times,
Yeah.
as we all are. But there is definitely there's definitely been a shift in terms of how I view success, and it's no longer defined by how many properties I've got or how much money I've got in the
Yeah.
bank, because I've done all that. I've went from being on job seekers allowance to getting financial freedom, and realized that actually I'm still having anxiety
The
attacks, I'm
same
still
things.
having
Yeah.
panic attacks, I'm still bloody miserable, I'm still struggling to leave the house. And there's been times outwardly it looks like my life's absolutely bloody amazing, and I've felt like internally I'm just screaming and crying.
Straight in there. I feel like you've just condensed the episode down into like a minute. So thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. No, but honestly, you've hit the nail on the head. Like I think this is what I love about kind of podcasting and getting into that kind of like the nitty gritty of the why behind it. Why are you not feeling 100%? And I resonate so much with the question mark around happiness. I always thought like being successful would equal happiness. Like, oh, I've got all these incredible things, like, so I must be happy. But then, you know, I'd get like an opportunity and I should be on cloud nine. And I'm like, but I don't feel happy.
Yeah.
It's not until I took that step away and it was like, it was the happiness I was finding, like the little moments, like, you know, going out for dinner with like my friends, going out like with my sister, and you know, like that kind of thing. I feel like that to me is where you really find those moments of happiness. I don't think it's just a one size fits all, like, oh, if I get to this point, I'm guaranteed happiness. Because like you just said, you've lived the life, like you've gone from bottom to the top and you were still feeling those certain kind of the struggles, the anxieties, like as you were saying. So it just goes to prove, like,
but you know what you
be
said
present.
there. So you said something really interesting. Like, what is the top? Because we see people, we see celebrities,
true, yeah.
we see influencers, we see actors, we see these people that are the epitome of success as we are conditioned to believe. They've got the multi-million-pound mansions, the swimming pools, they've got the beautiful bodies, whatever that means to you, the six packs, the abs, the designer clothes, the Bugattis, whatever else. They've got the flourishing careers. And yet we see so many, obviously not all the time, but we see so many of those people obviously feeling like they've got a huge void because we have, you know, such terrible issues with mental health and suicide and drug addiction and gambling and porn and everything else. And I just think it's really interesting how we have been programmed to believe that the top is what is the top? Because going back to what you just said there, you know, I've got my 3 somewhat feral children who I absolutely adore. They're absolutely amazing. And the highlight of my day, bar none, is at 7:30 when their alarms go off. They come into our bedroom. My husband and I, we get up a lot earlier than that. I've usually been out and done what I'm doing, my run, my ice bath, whatever else. Getting my PJs back on, getting to bed at like 7:15 with my hubby, with my black coffee. We get the dogs are piled up, and then the kids run in 10 minutes later. And we have like 20 minutes every morning of just cuddles. It's just absolutely amazing. And like before, I was too busy chasing the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, that I honestly didn't have the gratitude and the appreciation for the moment, and realizing actually the things that truly make me happy are going out walking in the woods with a family. They're like doing snakes and ladders and Ludo on a Sunday night. They're sitting together and having that Sunday roast. And like, I'm not trying to make out like I'm some sort of monk and I'm not materialistic. I do like the nicer things as well. I agree in abundance in all areas of life, but I just think it's interesting that people perceive other people as getting to the top. And at the time when people were really starting to think that about me, I still felt very unfulfilled, very shallow, and I'd not actually taken the time to do the inner work. And I'm not necessarily talking about something deeply woo-woo here, but you do have to, like, we are sort of, just my own personal story is that, like, I was papering over the cracks. I wasn't really taking the time to step back and think what's going to fulfill me, what's my purpose, what am I trying to achieve. And actually, like, a lot of people know me for property and the property development, and I try not to talk about that too much because, like, I'm not even that excited by it. It's not, it was a vehicle for us to make money, and it, you know, it got me off a job seekers allowance. I'm very grateful for that vehicle, but I'm in no way attached to property. I'm just an entrepreneur. My passion's my podcast. It's talking to people. This is my university. I learn, I grow. And now I'm in a position where I'm sharing value with hundreds of thousands and millions of listeners as well, who really, you know, I'm not a Joe Rogan. I'm not established. I'm not experienced. I'm not as well
You're an Ellie
developed in life.
McKay. That's what you are. You're an Ellie McKay.
I'm an Ellie McKay, and people love the vulnerability. They love to come on the journey with you, as, you know, someone who's not presenting myself, nor will I ever, as the finished article. I'm just as fucked up as everybody else trying to figure out this game of life, you know?
Straight in with the gold on. I absolutely love you already, but I need to start my show with something called the Weekly Waffle. I mean, we've waffled already.
I'm on the right show.
Literally, definitely on the right show. The perfect guest. But I do start each one of my shows with something called the Weekly Waffle. And this is something that me, myself, me and my guests have a little bit of a waffle about, once we've got it off our chest, we feel a little bit better. Now, I feel like you might appreciate this one, but with your kind of work, I imagine you're incredibly busy. There's a lot going on. But what really winds me up this week, I mean, I'll say this week, it's Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? It is Wednesday. Is the phone calls, and if you've answered the phone and they don't quite hear you, we have like a range of hellos that we use just to make sure that someone can hear us. I probably haven't articulated that very well, but it's like, when you answer a phone and it's like you can't quite hear someone, you're like, hello, 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 hello. And I don't know why. I was literally listening to, like, someone didn't realize that I didn't answer the phone. They left me a voicemail, and I literally listened to about 30 seconds of someone saying hello, hello, hello in a range of different voices and accents. I was just like, it's a voicemail. So yeah, that's wound me up.
You know what? I resonate with that one, and I also love the fact that you're only getting to question 117 minutes.
Yes,
I bet this has got to be some sort. I bet you're thinking, oh fuck, we've only allocated an hour for this.
I only said good morning.
Oh,
but no, you are literally
now
the
you're
perfect
asking me
guest.
like, sorry, I cut you off. That was really rude. What did you say?
No, I was just saying you're the perfect guest. Perfect guest for the show that was created for people to waffle. So waffle
you know
away.
what? And I'm now thinking, how do I condense like what annoys me? Okay, so let me tell you, the short answer is people.
Perfect.
I love and hate people in equal measures. No, I really don't. It's people not doing what they say they're going to do. And also it's people not operating with integrity. And I could give you a million and one examples of that in business where people project themselves in a certain way. Actually, when it comes down to transact with them, they are not who they have insinuated. They don't have the funds that they say or the expertise, etc., etc. But I'm going to give you a personal example because our house is currently on the market, and people not turning up to viewings that have been confirmed, I find that highly
That's rude.
It's so rude because I don't know if you've ever sold your own home. It's a military operation, getting it tidy, getting rid of all the clutter. No one lives like that. And if you do, like, there's something wrong with you, unless you've got like a living maid, unless you've got loads of staff, in which case, yeah, amazing. If you're a normal person, we have cleaners as well. We're quite fortunate. But I mean, oh my God, the house is still ransacked. So to get a little bit of order, have it looking like a show home for the viewing, to also make sure the kids are out the house because they run amok. The dogs go mental. They're amazing. They're so protective. They hate anyone being in our house. So they just bark at anyone relentlessly that comes in, which is an issue for viewings. So to make sure that I'm out walking the dogs, the kids are somewhere else, at grandparents, the house is immaculate, for somebody to just not turn up, like, to me is absolutely disgusting. We actually had a couple do that, and then they got in touch a week later and asked for the viewing again. I was like, they're not allowed in our house. Like, they're under no. We actually had somebody who came for a second viewing. They then let us down for a third viewing. Again, same thing, just didn't show up. Confirmed booking, then put an offer in a week later, and I said to the agent, I'm not selling to them. I don't care what their offer is. I said, I am not selling to people like that, because they'd lied to the agent as well. They'd lied about their circuit. And I was just like, they were proceedable. And one of my personal and company values is people over profits. And sometimes that's to my detriment. But I just think, if you can do that now, if you can look us in the eye and lie to us about something simple, then what's stopping you not acting with integrity as this sale
further on down the line? I respect that.
There you go.
That's a beautiful waffle.
Yeah, and to be fair, that was quite concise for me.
Yeah, Joella, I think that's the first question you've actually answered.
I said I'm doing well.
That's true. It's true. You're getting there. You get there. To be fair, I want to dive into now your journey, because it is remarkable, and you are very open. You're very honest, and I respect you so much more now. I mean, I did it anyway, but now, like, having this conversation with you and making this connection, I'm like, what a woman. Like, honestly, and to be fair, like, I have this thing anyway, because obviously I was raised by an incredibly strong woman. You know, it's the reason why I have the waffle shop. And so when I have these kind of conversations with like a mom who have that drive and that passion and that kind of that grit to like put anything in my way, because believe me, it's going to be a stepping stone. It will never ever be an obstacle. Like I do have so much respect for. And so speaking, I've just hyped this up now. So
Drum roll.
your journey, obviously, kind of in your words, like how did that start? Because I know there was a lot more before, like you obviously were made redundant at that point, but like what made Ellie Ellie?
Oh, yeah. I mean, great question. And it's where to start with it really, because I was always, I mean, I was a bit of a tearaway as a
Yeah.
teenager. I got into quite a bit of bother, a lot of underage drinking, hanging around with the wrong crowd. I was actually in quite an affluent area, a good school, but you know, I managed to kind of find the dregs of society to kind of hang about with. We were going through a lot of personal trauma at the time. My mum and dad were going through a really nasty breakup. We were also on the verge of going bankrupt. Their business was going bankrupt. We went from having a sort of beautiful big detached house and going on 5-star holidays to bailiffs at the door to repossess our things. So that wasn't great. My sister had quite extreme mental health problems, so she was literally chopping her hair off and rocking in cupboards and getting sectioned. And this kind of all happened at the same time. And I don't know what happened. I can't remember a specific light bulb moment, but one of the people in the crowd that I was hanging about with actually died from a drug overdose, from a heroin overdose. And whilst I've you know, I used to have a bit of weed or whatever as a teenager, and I wasn't really, you know, into anything more hardcore than that, but I was looking at the people in my life and looking in the direction that they were going. They, you know, they were all on benefits, none of them worked, they were constantly in and out in prison. And it's that whole thing, who you surround yourself with, you become. And I'd never done any sort of self-development at that point, but I had enough about me somehow, some sort of inner grit, because I wasn't getting any support from my family. My mum and dad were both kind of having their own mental breakdowns, and you know, I was kind of
you have to be your own hero, don't you? Like it's that, yeah, as sad as it sounds, it's kind of like no one is coming to save you. It's that kind of like you have to sometimes put that cape on yourself and be like, no, I'm gonna do this.
And as much as like I've got so much empathy for people with mental health, having been through it myself, and we'll come to that, you know, I've been on the brink of suicide on a couple of occasions. So I don't want to sound like I'm not someone who acknowledges how serious these things can be. I do think if more people looked within for the answers as opposed to looking externally, they would perhaps be a lot less people that are on medication or are you know, taking decisions that ultimately are irreversible. So at that time, I'd been at college. I wanted to be a war correspondent. And I kind of realized that actually I couldn't go out there and do that straight away. I was going to have to work in an office and like make tea for people and all of that. I was like, fuck this shit. Like, this is boring. This is not what I signed up for. You know, I was learning how to do like shorthand and learning about law and all. Like, I was just like, what? Like, what is this nonsense? So I was working at Burger King just part time, and I decided I was going to go full time there. So the family are all going mental. You're going, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, they all saw me as somebody who was going to go out and achieve great things. I was always quite like driven as a child, not necessarily academically, but like I think it was quite obvious that I had something about me.
There, yeah.
So anyway, like I actually took great pleasure in pissing all the family off and like working full time at Burger King, because again, I realized very, very early on I was quite anti-establishment, not anti-establishment at that point, anti-authority. Like, who are all these people trying to tell me what to do? Like, sort your own fucking lives out. So I was looking at them and they were all a mess, you know, like my mum, my dad and stuff. I'm like trying to give me business advice as I've got bailiffs at the door. I'm like, fuck off, you know, with love. Fuck off with love.
See you at Christmas.
Yeah, it's like, it's be careful who you take your advice on. I love my parents, but there's certain people and learn a lot from. We can learn a lot from everybody. But you know, if you want to learn about business, you go to someone who's got a successful business. If you want to learn about fitness, you go to someone who is fit. You know, it's kind of common sense. So
you
anyway,
wouldn't learn how to ride a bike from someone who can't ride a bike, would you? It's simple.
I mean, but common sense is not very common.
That's true, actually.
Common sense is really not very common. But this is like the whole biography out like really quickly. So a friend of mine came into Burger King one day. And I was like, oh, what are you doing here? Because we're in the next sort of town. And she's like, oh, I work for this double glazing place around the corner. Like we get to talk to people all day. And I'm like, what? You
get paid for that?
This is my dream. This is my dream. As you can imagine, like you know enough about me now to know I do not shut up. So I was just like, you get paid for this. So she told me she was on 40p an hour more than me. I was on £3.60. She was on £4. So I was like, this is a done deal. At my lunch break, I marched down. I went to see if they had any jobs. They did. And yeah, like that was the kind of start of it. There was a bit more that happened, but the very like short version of that is I was really, really good at outbound sales, selling double glazing. It really built up my resilience, a lot of life skills. I think everyone should actually do it. And relationship building as well. It was, it was really good fun. And I got promoted very quickly. I found myself in a situation age 17 when I'd been promoted from assistant manager up to manager. And I was kind of like, I was earning like a couple of grand a week in commissions and stuff like that. Suddenly, like everybody who was telling me that I was chucking my life away and I'd never amount to anything because I'm not off to university and following the traditional path were like, oh, like
it's funny how money does that, isn't it? Though it's funny, like it's like kind of going back to what you said, like when we first started about like success equaling like money. So it's batshit crazy.
You know what's interesting as well, and I found this in later life because the road to traditional success, if you like, it's not been straightforward. I've had money, I've lost money, I've had money, I've lost money. Like all it's like it is that's just been the path, and it's very interesting seeing how people change towards you as you start amassing like wealth or properties or whatever. They see you building your brand, like they see that I'm now connected to all these amazing high profile people through my podcast and like the power of association through that. It's very interesting that people who didn't give you the time of day before are suddenly like, oh, like Ellie, people I messaged 3 years ago to come on my podcast that never replied. Now that they can see that I've got like these A-listers on, they're like, oh, sorry to get back to you, blah blah blah. Here's my mobile
6 years
number.
later.
It's
I always find this interesting. I mean, I'm nowhere near that kind of like thing, but it's when I first started mine, there was a lot of people like pointing and laughing, I felt. And it's now those people who are pointing and laughing are asking me how I did it. And I'm like, well, you didn't give me the time of day or the respect when I kind of felt like I needed it. And unfortunately, now I'm in a position where if you want to get to that point, you're going to have to earn my respect now. I know that sounds very like, oh, I don't like big-headed and stuff, but like I can't, you don't get bigger by tearing other people down. And I hate that feeling.
You really, really don't. And whilst we can't say yes to every opportunity, like when like I was approached to come on your podcast and stuff, and I'm like checking out your Instagram, I was like, this is a good guy. This is a guy that's got good values, that got good vibes. And to me, it's not about how many downloads or whatever you're doing at the moment. It's about this guy's producing good content. Like he's on the right path, and I want to be part of something because you're going places. And also, like, again, going back to the connection, relationships are the highest form of currency. So to me, this is like such a win-win because I get to meet a new friend and someone that I can learn from and like hear about your stories as well if I would actually shut up long enough to let you speak.
No, we're here to talk about you because I do find you really fascinating, and it is like it's the lived experience for me. Like I just find it so fascinating how people go through life. And there's so many times when we're faced with these kind of difficult things that it's so easy just to give up. And there's been so many times when I've just wanted to throw in the towel, like I just can't keep going at this rate because I'm not getting this back. And then I'll have that one conversation with someone and I'm like, that's why you don't give up. You can do anything. You just cannot give up. You just have to keep going.
You know what? I was just saying this to my daughter, actually. I dragged her out for a run. She's only 10. And, she wanted to stop. And I says, look, you can slow down, but you can't stop. You cannot ever stop. You don't get any points. It doesn't have to be 0 to 100, but we do just always need to keep going.
Yeah.
Just one more step, just one more step. And I've got quite a probably controversial view of goals, because everyone's like, start with the end in mind and all of that kind of thing. Whereas I prefer to focus on the process, becoming the best version of myself, becoming more efficient. So my end goal with the podcast, I used to say, oh, I want to be bigger than Joe Rogan, I want to be this one. And I realized I don't actually care. I need to focus on the here and now. I need to make sure that we're getting slicker at our video editing. We need to get better processes in place. We need to tighten up the onboarding. That we need to make sure we're putting a little bit more focus on the TikTok. Like, we need to just be focusing on the here and now and getting a little bit better every single day and continuing with that momentum. And when you do that, when you keep just trying to be better than you were the day before, that's when you do attract opportunities. And the compound effect of those small incremental changes is absolutely massive. But the only thing that I think differentiates the, in quotation marks, successful people, whether that's successful podcasters, successful in whatever industry, is the fact that we haven't given up. Because I can guarantee every single person has had a point where they're questioning their own sanity. They're thinking, this is futile. What's the point? You have to be a certain kind of crazy to do what we do. There's setbacks in our property business. We've had billionaire investors back out and leave us with no funding for like 10 properties that are going through. We've had so many things happen to us time and time again. We've been screwed over by builders. We've lost tens of thousands of pounds, if not more, on like a development that the guy then pulled the plug on, like just behaved in a really unscrupulous manner. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said that it doesn't impact you. But ultimately, these situations only have the meaning that we choose to attach to them. And obviously, it doesn't feel like that at the time, but you learn a lot more about yourself from the hard times than you ever will from the mountain tops. And that is the reality. And this is why I enjoy doing the podcast, because you speak to people, whether it's a best-selling author, whether it's an Olympic athlete or a world champion boxer. It doesn't really matter. They've all overcome their own kind of adversity. They've all had times where they want to walk away. And it's very interesting to see, although everyone's got their own story, their own path, their own journey, what are the similarities? What are the common denominators? Because no one who's achieved anything of any significance has done so without overcoming some serious obstacles.
I absolutely love you. I felt like I want to clap. No, I'm going to clap. Honestly, though, you are literally speaking my language. And I kind of want to go back a little bit to that, about those kind of like obstacles and stuff. And you mentioned there like a few things about like investors pulling out, builders, and I imagine there's like been life lessons along the way. How do you navigate those kind of like difficult moments? Like, is it that fire and like you kind of like, it's a stepping stone, or how do you get through that?
Yeah, now, but like, I mean, there's still the odd meltdown. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one's got all the fucking answers. It's just nonsense. And I'm so sick of meeting people who outwardly project that they're a complete guru. And you speak to them and they're like cheating on their wife. Their business is actually like on the verge of collapse, or using bridging finance to pay the staff, and like all of these things that, and they're still taking money off people for training courses on how to live your best life. You're like, fuck off. There's a lot of frauds out there. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I don't want to be part of that. And that's why I say I definitely have not got it all figured out. And that's why I'm so interested in so much more than just business, because like going back then to, I told you I got the high performance job. Like, I was responsible for like 100 staff. I relocated to Yorkshire. I was the area manager for the Yorkshire region. Things were going great, but then life happened. My sister got really unwell again. My parents, they were divorced at this point, but they were both struggling, and I needed a 9 to 5. I needed to be able to, when I worked in sales, I used to work Saturdays and Sundays. I needed something that I could get back to Scotland at the weekend and basically prioritize my family over my career. So I kind of left that environment completely and took a job working in recruitment at 16 grand a year. And it wasn't even enough to pay my rent. So I had to get a second job in an evening just to be able to do that. And it was a bit of a, not necessarily a fall from grace, but I started from the beginning all over again, and had a few little career changes and worked my way up. Ended up working in the prison service, in the education department in resettlement for 9 years, where I worked with offenders, helping them to rehabilitate, to enhance their employability skills for their release, and just
That's
help
incredible.
with. Yeah, I mean, it sounded great, but it became a paper pushing exercise, as these things do. A lot of red tape. The way the prisons are run is like a complete joke. No one could actually make any changes because they've got so many different partners and like agencies in that, like, and they change the governors every 2 seconds. It was just became a farce. A job that had been quite fulfilling was a complete farce. But I was also not tapping into any of that potential that I'd once had in my late teens, early 20s, when I was into self-development. I was listening to people like Tony Robbins. I became very disillusioned. I became very jaded. I thought that was a load of like woo-woo, happy clappy bullshit just for American people. And, you know, I just thought, what, your thoughts can become your feelings? Like, what a load of bollocks. Do you know what I mean? And that was me. I was a bit of a almost anti-personal development type. And it probably is no coincidence that my life was kind of going, not necessarily going to shit, but my husband and I, we still had that entrepreneurial spirit. When we were in our early 20s, we, it is embarrassing, but this is a true story. We sat on a beanbag and we Googled the best way to get rich quick, and decided that property development was the way to do it. So we bought an off-plan property, and the sort of whole premise of it was, we buy it, it gets built, it's worth significantly more than we paid for it. You flip it on the same day, you make like 100 grand profit. And this was all great. We didn't have any money to invest, so we got bank loans. We did all sorts of things just to get this property deal over the line. And sadly, a few things happened, like the development got flooded. It was all postponed for a few years. Next thing you know, we're smack bang in the middle of the 2008 recession. Honestly, it was a nightmare. It should have been worth like 200 odd grand. It was worth like 60. It was a joke.
Wow.
The developers still wanted their money. They were threatening to come after us for the little assets we did have, like our secondhand cars and our like little semi-detached house, you know, in the arse end, Doncaster kind of thing. And I pretty much had a mental breakdown. There was no coping strategies there other than wine and tears, anxiety, depression, medication, heavy duty medication that would like have me literally falling asleep in the middle of dinner and things like that. My solutions certainly didn't come from within at that point. It was a lot easier for me to, and hey, by the way, I'm not trying to have a pop at anyone taking antidepressants. I'm just saying I wasn't looking at anything.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't. Everyone's like different when it comes to the medication side of things.
I think like for me, yes, like there will be people, I'm sure, who do benefit from it, but I just don't think people should get prescribed medication until they've addressed the other areas of their life. And I saw multiple doctors. Nobody was asking me how much I was drinking. Nobody was asking me about the shite I was eating, whether I was exercising, or you just sat listening to BBC Lies every night, depressing yourself with propaganda, you know, and negativity, because bad news sells. Your worldview becomes very jaded if you're watching the news.
Quick fix generation, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's just literally, that's the problem. Take a pill for it, fix it. And so, to be fair, there's a certain level I agree with that, because I've been on sertraline, I've been on citalopram, and it's just kind of it didn't work with my body. It wasn't until I started like journaling, going like on longer walks, making the connections I was making, that's when I noticed I think that's had more of a profound kind of impact on my mental health than any tablet ever did.
Yeah, but that's not very profitable, is it?
True.
That's not a multi-trillion-dollar industry.
Look at us getting all
well, I love a good conspiracy theory, but so to answer your time, like what we managed to question, sorry, not answer your time. we completed on this property deal, right? I don't know how, by hook or by crook. We came up with the capital. We like big borrowed and stole, and we did what we said we were going to do. It's one of those things, I think, when your back's against the wall. Tony Robbins, well, I don't think it was Tony Robbins, actually. It was Fernando Cortez or something like that. There was a story, Burn the Ships, and I'll butcher it. I'll butcher all these stories, but you'll get the gist of it. So basically, they went with the army to go and capture this island and to take it over. And when they got there, it became very apparent that they were like massively outnumbered. The soldiers did not want to go and do it. They were like, this is just going to be certain death. We want to go back home. This is madness. So he burnt the ships. He sunk them. And he's like, well, you're going to have to fight now, lads, because failure is not a fucking option. And yeah, that was kind of like what it was for us, but it wasn't without its toll. And yeah, that's sort of around the time that I was going on to the medication. I very much at that point in my life needed the 9 to 5. I had no interest in being an entrepreneur. I was actually very risk averse after that whole experience. I wanted to know when I was getting paid. I wanted to know how much I was getting paid. And, you know, that's why arguably this crazy world of business isn't necessarily for everybody. We need everyone in every role, don't we? And yeah, at that point, my husband went up on to sort of build his electrical business. But for me, I was quite happy doing something pretty mundane. I didn't need to think about too much, come home, switch off. And it wasn't until, as you quite rightly said, I got made redundant, which was 2018, that I kind of, this fire started to ignite in me. But just another little thing to mention to the listeners as well, because even that wasn't, you know, we didn't just go from 2010 to 2018 without drama. 2016, our electrical business was literally an inch away from bankruptcy. We had 18 lads working for us at the time, 18 Sparkies. There was a national contractor that went bust in a very unscrupulous way as well. They knew they were going bust, and they continued to use a lot of companies like ourselves and feed off our resources. And then they went under, and it came down to the wire whether or not we were going to keep trading. My husband and his business partner knew that we weren't going to get the money, and they made a decision there and then to go to the bank before it was common knowledge we weren't going to get this money, and to take out a bank loan to make sure that those 18 lads got paid. And they knew that by doing that, that could be the thing that toppled the full house of cards. And thankfully they didn't. But I like to mention that story because at the time, if anyone's listening to this who has been through a situation where they've went bankrupt or they've nearly went bankrupt, you're worried about being able to pay the bills and maintain the family home, there's not a feeling like it. You know, you're literally waking up in the night with cold sweats, with heart palpitations. My husband, he's never been someone who's prone to anxiety and mental health in the same way that I have, but he was having really what I would now class as panic attacks when he was struggling to breathe, and the heart's going in the night, and he's not sleeping. It's insomnia, and it was just the worst time. I was also signed off work at this point because I'm pregnant with my second daughter, Isabella. In hindsight, it was probably stress related, but I was in extreme pain and discomfort throughout the pregnancy. I was at a lot higher risk of miscarrying. I was in and out of hospital the full time, and I was bedbound. They actually thought I had Crohn's disease, which I absolutely don't, but that was the sort of thinking at the time. And all this is happening whilst we were on the brink of bankruptcy, and it was just the most horrendous time. And when our daughter Isabella was born, in the midst of all the chaos, she was like our little beacon of light. It was still a really dark time, and nobody knew. Like, some of my closest friends knew we were going through shit, but even then, you know, I was still life and soul of the party. I would still put a smile on if we were meeting for a coffee or for a play date. And they had no idea that in order to go to that cup of coffee, I might have been laid in the fetal position, like crying and shaking an hour before. So it's interesting the perceptions we have of other people. And 3 months after Isabella was born, we're still kind of very much going through all this shit. You know, the shit storm's not passed yet. My husband, we had a conversation. We've got 2 beautiful girls. We're like, okay, our family's complete. Let's book you in for the snip. So he had his consultation on the Monday for the vasectomy. And on the Friday before his appointment, we found out I was pregnant with my third and definitely final. Beautiful little boy, Samuel. So, at the time, and by the way, oh my God, thank you, universe, for giving me such a beautiful gift. But at the time, you're like, come on, what else can you chuck at
Anything
me?
else?
What
Anything
what
else?
else? What else is there? So when I got made redundant in 2018, I was still on maternity leave with
Yeah,
Sam. So it really, that was kind of symbolized the end of that life and the beginning
yeah.
of my new life.
So there's something quite powerful in that, isn't there? Because it's kind of like you could have sat and you dwelled on that, like, what are we going to do next? But to be fair, I think you said it with Isabella. You said her name was like that little beacon of like hope at that time. And then I imagine, was it a similar feeling when obviously you found out about like Bob now who became Sam? Like, it was that like,
No,
okay,
no, that
oh
was
no,
like
no.
that. Full transparency. I have postnatal depression. Like,
Oh
we're trying
no.
not to go bankrupt. I'm already got a newborn baby who's not sleeping. I was fucked in the head. Like, I was totally fucked in the head. My
Wow.
husband was going for a vasectomy. Like and I've got to be careful how I word this. My son might listen to this at some point in the future. He is the biggest blessing. I don't necessarily know if I believe in God. I certainly believe in the universe, but
Yeah.
someone was looking out for me. Somebody gave me the most beautiful gift that you can ever give another human being, and he is the apple of my eye. But I have to be honest, at the time, like, I remember ringing my dad up. Bearing in mind, everyone knows I'm batshit crazy. Like, I'm clearly mentally unwell. I was not in a great place, and I'm ringing my dad up. Isabella's 3 months old, and I was like, I'm crying. I was like, Dad, I'm pregnant. He's like, oh, darling, you've had the baby.
Oh
Like,
no.
no, this is another
Oh.
one.
Wow.
Unreal, unbelievable. But like, I genuinely could not be happier with my life situation now. But and I do believe everything happens for a reason. But I have to be honest about how I felt at the time as well, because it's the same as when I'm talking about any other hardships in life
Mm,
or business that I've learned the most powerful lessons from. It would be very disingenuous to say to me, when you fucking lose out on a multi-million-pound deal, or something really tragic happens in your life, you're like, oh, brilliant, great, what lessons am I going to get from this?
yeah.
That comes from time. That comes from not just mindset, but trying to build your emotional intelligence as well, and really trying to not necessarily turn negatives into positive. These all sound really cheap, but turning pain into power and thinking, right, okay, there's always lessons that can be learned.
100%.
How can we mitigate? Sometimes it's something that's totally out of your control, but if it's not, how can we mitigate against this happening again? How can we improve? How can we get better? How can we take ownership of this? Because if we don't take ownership, if you're in victim mentality, as I was for many, many years, you are basically outsourcing your happiness to somebody else. Oh, well, they did this, or they should have done that. My boss promised me a promotion. This should have happened. That's not fair. I've done X and I should have got Y, and that person's been doing this 2 minutes, and look at the opportunities they're getting. If you're in that frame of mind, you're really not asking the right questions. That's just the reality. I've had a week of people letting me down just now. And my husband went to have a bit of a rant. We were in the car driving somewhere yesterday, and he's like, what about such and such? So much for they've always said that if we needed X, they would deliver Y, and do 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 do. And I was like, look, we need to realize nobody on this earth owes us anything.
Yeah.
Okay. We just need to make sure that we live life by our values. We do what we say we're going to do. That's important to us. And you know what? That person hasn't done anything wrong. They've just not lived their life in accordance to the values that they've projected. And we learn from that. We know not to put trust in that person again, and perhaps are not as open in terms of how we conduct ourselves and the information we share moving forwards. But ultimately, they can do them, we'll do us. I use that as motivation, because although we're not meant to really talk like this, because we're all meant to be self-development experts and all that, that's fucking motivation for me. I'm like, you know what? Whatever you achieve in life, that's my motivation to achieve a little bit more.
I love it. You're absolutely spot on. And do you know what? It is so refreshing to have someone on the podcast who has this kind of like mentality, and it's not like I don't want to say it because it sounds bad on like on other guests that I've had on. It's not that at all. It's just really refreshing to have that, because there's sometimes when what you've just said, I've wanted to scream like at the top of my lungs and just been like, right, get your shit together. Like, you know, we've all had those days and those moments where we do play the victim. It's very easy to say like, why isn't this happening to me? Why is this happening to that person? When, you know, it's that kind of saying of like, good things happen to bad people or bad things happen to good people. Like, things happen at the moment they're supposed to happen, whether you're good or bad. It's about you and how you navigate through that good situation, how you navigate through that bad situation. It's just like, come on, you just keep going regardless of what's going on around you.
But you know what, as well, like, I think it's about not trying to be something we're not. Like, so I've been in situations where something shit's happened, and I've got basically somebody telling me to change my state, and I just think, stop being a bellend. Like, if something shit's happened, I'm allowed to feel shit, and I want
Yeah.
to give other people permission to feel shit. If something horrendous is going on in your life, you are not going to be super duper motivated all the time. It's okay not to be okay. Where I differ from you know, a lot of the messages that are shared on social media, it's not okay to stay there. Like, it isn't. You have to take action to get yourself out of that. But if something really bad happens to me, if we take a knock or a blow, which inevitably happens to all of us, I don't want to change my fucking state. I might want to the next day, but maybe I want to just go and binge eat on a pizza, sedate to Netflix without being told to go for a fucking run and listen to Tony Robbins. I'll do that the next day, but the difference is I will do that the next day. But do you know what I mean? If I want to go home and pour myself a glass of fucking wine and have a cry or a shout or whatever else, then that is okay too. That is real life. That is normal. People are trying to compare themselves to a false reality. That is the truth. And if there are people out there who get really, really shit news and they just want to go on an ultra marathon and get in the race, that's great for them too. But that's not a one size fits all. Like, it is normal to feel anger, resentment, jealousy, pain. You know, of course, we don't want to live in those states. We then want to try and internalize some of those emotions and make sure we can improve on them for the future. But come on, we're all human, just trying to do our best here, you know?
My cheekbones are actually like hurting from like, yes. I feel like a nodding dog. I feel like I'm on like on a one-to-one kind of like I don't know what it is.
Like a
It's one of the words.
seminar.
Yeah, that's the one. I'm like, yeah.
I'm like the alternative Tony Robbins, you know?
Oh no, but do you know what though? I feel like this is what makes you so relatable, because there's no hiding anything. Like, you know, like what you see is what you get. And I think whether it's like business, whether it's kind of, you know, from a personal point of view, it's just proof that being 110% yourself, one, it's okay to be yourself, but two, like, look at where it can take you. It's so powerful.
And you know what? I think it's accepting that not everyone's going to like you, because most of us, if we're being truly honest, regardless of what little memes we share on social media about fuck what people think, most of us do actually care what people think. And it's quite a difficult thing to detach, you know, to remove your ego. But actually, like, when I look back, when I started my social media journey, I was trying to be all things to all people. And in truth, I'll hold views that you don't agree with. You'll hold views I don't agree with. We don't have to agree with every single view of each other's to be friends, to respect each other, to, you know, work well together. And that's where that authenticity, I think, comes in, because somebody will listen to this and they'll be like, oh, I really like the 80% of that. But yeah, I think, like, she was talking a bit of bollocks, so the other 20%. And that's absolutely fine. You can have the meat without the bones. I do when I listen to audiobooks or when I'm interviewing guests, a bit like yourself. I'm like, oh, I really respect how that person's done that, and the disciplines that they have around their fitness. I don't think I necessarily like resonate with your work-life balance or the way that this person does that. And nor do I need to, you know, it's for the listeners as well to discern which parts from which people they want to take and implement. But, you know, I do think that for me, had one of the things that was damaging to my mental health when I was trying to rebuild in 2018 was that comparison. Like, I thought, you know, as a lot of people do, that everybody else was so much further on. And if we could all spend, and I'm a bit of a hypocrite with this as well, but a bit less time on social media fixating on what other people are doing, and a bit more time focusing on what really matters, which is ourselves, our families, our own journeys, our you know, spiritual, mental, physical health, financial wealth, adding value. And another thing. So everyone talks about what is your why, okay? Like, I found that really no, I don't overwhelming. I don't know. I used to give answers to that were probably disingenuous, because what's your bigger purpose? You need to be working on something that's bigger than you to really motivate yourself to get up. And it's like, at the time, very like in 2018, I just wanted to get off benefits. Like, I just wanted to know I had enough money in the bank to pay my mortgage and to feed my kids and to take us on holiday or whatever once a year. Like, that was my why. That was my motivation. It wasn't to like eradicate world hunger or anything like that. And I think a lot of the time, and then, like I said before, I realised when I got to a certain amount of properties that okay, that's not the definition of success. I am still very miserable. And when you're miserable, when you're anxious, when you're depressed, you're not the best version of yourself. You're not the best mum. You're not the best wife. You're not the best friend. You're not the best business person. You're not the best leader. And actually, when I stopped trying to be all things to all people and talking about my passion, you say, I want a hotel in space. I want this. I want, you know, I want to build schools and I want to do all this stuff. And I'm not saying like that's not important. But again, really, I think people's why should just be getting themselves into optimal energy, being the best version of themselves. Because the reality is, unless you've got financial security, unless you've got good energy because you're mentally and physically in good shape, then you're probably not going to be in a position to make that contribution to the wider world anyway. So rather than fucking talking about world peace, why don't you sort your own shit out?
That's the soundbite. No, it's true. I think when you kind of hit the nail on the head again. When you said about like the, you know, what is your why? You know, find your why. Some days for me, that why is just getting out of bed, making my bed.
Yeah.
That's enough sometimes for me. And whereas beforehand, it was like, I need to think of some bullshit answer that I need to be doing something incredible. I need to be doing this incredible thing. Some days it is literally just being.
You know what? So again, I think this is why this podcast is flowing so well, because you're just on the same sort of wavelength as me. So 2018 is when we started our property journey and got ourselves educated, started getting into self-development, getting around people like Grant Cardone, went to his like 10X conference. Actually was sat with him having dinner that night. It was amazing. We got to go out for lunch with him the next day, started leveling up with my network, really started feeling quite empowered, buying properties. So I decided, in my infinite wisdom, that I was going to come off all my medication, but I wasn't going to do it the proper way. I wasn't going to speak to my doctor. I didn't need to speak to my doctor. I was just going to come out like, this is heavy, hardcore medication. Came off it all, right? Came off it all, cold turkey. And it left me feeling suicidal. So outwardly, I'm starting to build up this presence on social media, getting hundreds of likes, getting my validation, because that's all that matters, getting my validation on social media. And actually, behind the scenes, I was genuinely struggling to get out of bed. And success for me, I remember it vividly at that time. Success for me, I'd throw myself cookies. I'll be like, right, well, you don't need to get changed. This is my internal dialogue. Don't worry about getting changed. There's no need to get changed. But why don't you just brush your teeth? Just get out of bed, get to the ensuite, brush your teeth. If that's all you do, then that's all right. You're winning. And I'd get up and I'd be like, right, okay, I can do it. And I brush my teeth. And then once I brush my teeth, you know, I'd build it up. Maybe not that day, but maybe the next day. I'm like, well, just get your joggers on. You don't need to leave the house, but just get your joggers on. You can go back to bed if you want, but put your joggers on and then you've got the option. And then I get my joggers on and then, you know, I throw myself another cookie. Just get down, maybe make yourself some food, you know, because you don't look after yourself properly when you're depressed. And that was my definition of success. Every day I was ticking one of those things off my list. That was success. That was success. But you know what's really interesting as well? I never stopped posting on social media. I never stopped building my brand. If it was one thing I had to do in a day that was non-negotiable, it was my LinkedIn post at that time.
Yeah.
To keep, you know, we were saying before about you can want to stop, you can be in a really bad place, you can slow down to the point where you're like virtually stopped, but you're not quite fully stopped. And for me, that was the thing that kind of kept going and kept going. And so many people start things in life, whatever it is, personally, professionally. Not everyone's goal is to be a multimillionaire. That's not what I'm talking about. But they start things, and when the going gets tough, they stop. Or, you know, we mentioned before, we're sort of in an era, everyone wants that instant gratification, whether it's going to the doctors to get the magic tablet, or whether it's setting up a business and waiting for the first 7-figure check to land in their bank account, and whether it's getting off medication, whether it's setting up a business, whether it's achieving something in fitness or running a marathon. That only comes from doing the work, putting in the reps, putting systems in place to gradually improve, and, you know, keep going and keep going and keep going. And yeah, as much as not everyone needs to be a massive high flyer with millions of pounds in the bank, I do think we all need to appreciate the work that goes in, even to like setting up a podcast. Like, I'm a podcaster, I know what it involves, and you're going to continue to grow. You'll start maybe doing more in person. You'll, if you've not already, you know, you then got your YouTube, your TikTok, your paid membership sites. You're going to be doing Patreon, or you're going to do, you know, a book, or you're going to start, you know, getting publicity in magazines. Like, there's so many different things that go on to make a success of something that might outwardly seem really simple. So yeah, I've went off on a few tangents there.
No, I just, do you know what though? Like, I've kind of lapped up at every word that you've kind of said today. And I feel like you've kind of given me so much reassurance that, you know, those days when it does get tough, and there's been days, especially with the podcast, where I've wanted just like, you know what, you know how much work goes in, and it's literally a one-man operation. And it's like, oh, do you know what? I just can't do it. But it's just, this conversation especially has been one of those conversations for me to be like, you're on the right track. What you're doing matters, not only to me, but to other people as well. Like, you're incredible. And I have so much respect. I could sit and talk to you all day. I've literally lapped up, but I'm literally looking at the time thinking like, right.
We're only on question 2.
It's question 2. But okay. So to kind of round it off then, like, one final question. What advice would you give to someone who maybe not necessarily from a business point of view, it could be personal, like, who is in that position where they, you know, they don't know what the next step is? Like, what advice would you give to them to kind of keep going?
Well, so funnily enough, I was talking about my husband about this. I think one thing, there's many things that I can get better at, but one thing I'm quite good at is we call it going balls deep. You know, there is a tendency for all of us, in particular high performance people, to fixate on an idea, or this is what you need to do next, and then just go all in. And actually, sometimes we need to step back and make sure that our ladder's against the right wall, because I see this time and time again, a lot of people taking massive action, but they're taking the wrong action, and they have not allowed themselves any time when they're taking this mass action to identify that it's the wrong action, because they're so busy. And you know, it's really interesting because you said earlier, I'm sure you're super busy and things, and of course I work hard. You know, I am building businesses, I'm doing things, I'm managing a team and things like that, but I'm not as busy as people think that I am, because I leave a lot of time, like thinking time. My creativity does not come from working 14-hour days. We all have our own definition of work, because some of my best ideas come on a 2-hour dog walk or something like that, and I come back and then I'm like, okay, the brain's going, I'm firing off voice notes to my business partners, right, I've got this idea, let's do this, let's do that. So I think it's actually finding a little bit of stillness, really, to just, because you almost ask 2 different questions. Like, it's how do you know that you're doing the right thing, and then how do you not stop? So it's kind of 2 different answers. Don't rush into things. Don't necessarily do what everyone else is doing, but maybe step back and look at who's further down the path that you want to travel, and start getting around people like that. Not people that are talking the talk, but people that are actually walking the walk, because surrounding myself with people in my life who are way more advanced in every area. If I want to, like, I got challenged to run a half a marathon a couple of years ago, I couldn't even run a bath. But if I had just said that to my normal group of people, they'd be like, bloody hell, a half marathon. Like, oh my God, even doing a 5K is a lot for like my sort of non-fitness group of friends, you know, as it was for me. So I knew I had to get around with people that were doing back-to-back triathlons and running 100 miles without stopping, people that were going to make my goals look very manageable, and also like not allowing me to dramatize the fact that, because in my head I'm like the biggest hero going just for going out in any sort of jog or run, you know. So surrounding yourself with people like that, if you want to learn about business, you need to get around millionaires, you need to get around multi-millionaires, you need to get around billionaires, because they talk in a different way. They're very positive, they're very solution focused. What are they focusing on? Again, what are the common denominators? What are the attributes? You know, a question that I asked myself right at the very start when I looked in that accountability mirror, it wasn't what did I need to do in order to become a success. The question that I asked myself was, who do I need to become in order to be a success? You know, what does success look like to me? Well, it's someone who's confident, it's someone who's knowledgeable, it's someone who presents themselves well, it's someone who's well connected, it's some, you know, and all of these things. And I scored myself, I literally scored myself against all these points. And the reality was, you can't bullshit yourself. I was underperforming in all areas. So it wasn't, what do I need to do to launch my business or to raise millions of pounds of investment or whatever? It's, who do I need to become? And that's probably the best answer I can give you, because if you want to run a marathon, it's going to be different disciplines and habits that you need to somebody who's looking to build their business. But you are going to need to build those disciplines and those habits nonetheless. And, you know, for people who are thinking about quitting, which was the second part of the question, then, you know, ultimately this is what the difference between success and failure is. Winston Churchill famously said, the success is bumbling from one failure to the next without any loss of enthusiasm. How many of us can resonate with that? A winner is just somebody who's failed that's tried one more time. No one can do that for you. But just know, we've all been there. We've all had the struggles. The bigger you get, the bigger your challenges. It's not something that, again, and this is why I'm very transparent, you don't get to the top of the mountain and think, yeah, brilliant, made it. You just have further to fall potentially. You just have more money to lose on the deals. You know, you just have bigger problems to solve. That's the game of life. That's the fun in it. But it's all about perspective. A situation only has the meaning that you choose to attach to it. And if that's not the game you want to be in, make sure you set your goals accordingly so that you're achieving your own definition of success.
Fucking brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I literally forgot where I was, what I was doing then, and I was so fixated on everything that you've just said. I feel like I really needed to hear all that today.
Oh, you know that saying as well. Who says it? Is it that I forget? But when the student is ready, the master will appear. That always works for me. The right people always seem to come into my life at the right time.
Oh, completely. It's like it always goes back to that kind of like, I don't know, it was one of those things like I saw like on social media, and it was like the relationship that came to an end needed to end, that friendship that needed to end needed to end, that business that you needed to start needed to start, whatever it is. And it's that mentality of like, what's meant to be will never ever pass you by.
Yeah. My gags used to say that, God bless her. She used to say, what's for you won't go by you. Pay homage to my gaga there.
You have been an absolute belter of a guest to waffle with. I'm pretty sure we could have done a part 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
We might get through all those questions if we did.
Exactly. The notes I made, absolutely didn't need them. But no, honestly, it's incredible what you do. You're incredible. I love On a Mission, the podcast. Like you have waffled. No, that's my brand. You have obviously dived into the nitty gritty with like people from all like walks of life, and it's incredible. Like, it is so empowering and exactly what people need. So if you haven't listened, well, listen to this episode first. And obviously, if you like what you heard, go and listen to On a Mission, because it's phenomenal, the conversations that are being had. And it's stuff that, you know, I love to learn. And I think there's bits and bobs that I've took away from the podcast, and even today, that I know for a fact I'm going to apply to my life. So
Can I
thank
just
you.
say as well, your energy is amazing. Yeah, I've done quite a few interviews, as you can imagine, and this is definitely one of my favorites. So I've got high hopes for your
Yeah.
podcast. I know you're already smashing it, but I also know that you're only scratching the surface in terms of where it's going and what you're capable of. So really looking forward to watching your journey too.
Love it. Thank you for joining me for a waffle.
Thank you.